Recently, I watched a newly released science fiction film called I Am Mother. The story takes place after a catastrophic event that wipes out all humans on Earth. Before this disaster, 63,000 human embryos were stored in a secure underground facility. A robot selects one of these embryos and begins raising it. The rest of the film's plot isn't directly related to what I'm about to discuss, but that opening sequence sparked a number of questions in my mind. What kind of people would babies grow up to be if they were born inside a completely isolated environment? If it were possible to raise children without any contact with other humans, how would they communicate with one another? What language would they speak? Of course, these questions are not new. Throughout history, many attempts have been made to isolate newborn babies and observe them without allowing any written or spoken communication. These attempts are known as language deprivation experiments. The goal was to uncover the origins of human language and, more deeply, the foundations of human nature. Because isolating infants is profoundly unethical, cultural historian Roger Shattuck suggested calling these attempts the forbidden experiment. The first recorded example comes from the historian Herodotus. Around 600 BCE, the Egyptian pharaoh Psamtik I ordered two newborn babies to be taken from their parents and entrusted to a shepherd, who was strictly forbidden from speaking to them. The idea was that the children would naturally reveal humanity's original language. According to the story, the children's first spoken word was bagos. This word did not exist in Egyptian, but it was the Phrygian word for bread, leading the Egyptians to conclude that their own language and their origins came from Phrygia. Roughly 1,800 years later, in the 13th century, Emperor Frederick II conducted a similar experiment. Babies separated from their families received only basic care and were never spoken to. Why? Frederick wanted to know what the original human language was: Hebrew, Greek, Latin, or Arabic, languages of holy books and ancient texts. Ultimately, the historian Salimbeni, who recorded the experiment, never tells us which language the children spoke, only the cruelty of those who conducted the experiment. In later centuries, there were no such deliberate experiments, but isolated children appeared naturally, so-called feral children. These were children raised far from human contact. Without exposure to human language, none developed the linguistic abilities we consider natural. One famous case is Oksana, discovered in Ukraine, who grew up among dogs and communicated in dog-like ways. Other children were reportedly raised by wolves, sheep, cows, goats, even ostriches. Although some eventually learned certain human behaviors, almost none fully developed normal language abilities. Another form of natural isolation is deafness. When deaf children grow up surrounded by people who do not know sign language, they attempt to create their own systems of communication. For example, before 1980 in Nicaragua, deaf children had almost no means of communication. After the Nicaraguan Revolution, they were brought together in the country's first school for the deaf. Teachers attempted to teach them sign language, but the children, now older, could not learn it. Instead, something remarkable happened. The children invented an entirely new sign language among themselves. Linguists later analyzed this language and found it surprisingly complex and rich. This shows that communication doesn't require sound. Language is a natural human impulse. We still don't fully understand where languages come from or how they evolve, but we do know this: speaking is our primary way of sharing knowledge. Linguists believe that language emerges most powerfully when a group of people must share information with one another. Humans feed on knowledge, and we feel the need to speak in order to share what we learn. That's why we've created about 6,300 languages. At the start of the video, I mentioned I Am Mother, a movie about a child raised by a robot. The robot speaks to the child like a human would, so the child doesn't need to invent a new language. She learns about the world through conversations with the robot. In one scene, they discuss a modernized version of the philosophical trolley problem, evolving into a deeper moral question. Throughout history, people have wondered what happens when babies are isolated from the world, hoping to discover the origin of language and, ultimately, the essence of being human. But perhaps the answer isn't found by isolating others. Perhaps it comes from occasionally isolating ourselves, thinking more deeply, talking to the books we read, developing our inner voice. In that sense, maybe we discover our own mother tongue. I am mother may mean I am your parent, but perhaps what we truly find is the language Immanuel Kant referred to. All language is the representation of thought, and thinking, in his words, is a person's conversation with themselves. That might be the highest form of language we can develop.